the future of our planet is at risk. Our environment is facing an existential crisis, and transportation is at the heart of this problem. So in 2014, we created a special team to inspire generations to tackle climate change by harnessing the power of Formula E and our renewable technology to take our pledge around the globe. So join us on this incredible journey and help us win the race against climate change.
Hello, I am Georgie Bingham and this is the Race Against Climate Change Live. We are bringing it to you from the home of Envision Virgin Racing here at Silverstone, their race headquarters. Great to have you with us this afternoon. Well, after 158 days, Formula E is back, and with the racing returning, our platform to trumpet climate change is too. Envision Virgin Racing is no ordinary race team. Both on and off the track, we aim to raise awareness of the benefits of electric vehicles powered by renewable energy and our ability to revolutionise everyday transportation. We will bring you this afternoon world-leading climate experts and inspiring environmental advocates to continue the conversation started by this unique race brand this unique race team. Now, our environment is facing an existential crisis, and in 2020 alone, we have dealt with some unprecedented heat waves, wildfires and flooding, along with some other extreme weather conditions from around the world. And over the next 90 minutes, we'll have 3 panel discussions. We'll feature the like of actor Aidan Gallagher, footballer Hector Bellerin and Professor Michael Mann. And to be sure you get in on the conversation, you're welcome to join in using the hashtag Race Against Climate Change, and we will make sure that we have your input involved as well. Without further ado, well, I think it's time to hear from the big boss man of Envision Virgin Racing. Let's start at the top with a message from Chairman of the Board, Franz Jung.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I am delighted to open this year's quite special Race Against Climate Change Forum. A very warm welcome to all participants, in particular to our sponsors, partners, friends from the media, and of course, last but not least, our fans from all over the world. Ladies and gentlemen, 2020 certainly has been extremely challenging for, I would say, everyone on this planet. The world is going through a crisis, the likes of which we've never seen before, and I wish you and your dear ones are all safe. If there is one thing COVID-19 pandemic has taught us, it is how much being unprepared can cost. The coronavirus took us all by surprise, and the damage it has inflicted cannot be measured. We will face consequences for many years to come. At some point, I hope very soon, the pandemic will pass and life will get back to, many call it, new normal. The crisis is not a local, but to me a global challenge and should be addressed with teamwork. The situation has already improved in some areas in the world. I am optimistic we will see sustainable solutions in a foreseeable timeframe. I am convinced post the pandemic, we are also better prepared to handle another threat our world is facing today. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is equally dangerous, maybe more, if we are not prepared. The climate change. Climate change is a real threat, and us, all human beings, are largely responsible for it. Impacts such as increasingly high record temperatures, rising sea levels, severe flooding, and droughts are already the new normal. Together with our sponsors and partners, Envision Virgin Racing cares a lot about climate change. By competing in Formula E, Envision Virgin Racing is already playing a significant role driving sustainability awareness. I know no other sports format which is so consequent behind this topic, in and out the FIA and the Formula E organization, including all teams, are live examples to supporting the race against climate change. And if all of you agree with that, it's time for us to do something about it. We need to ask ourselves one important question. How prepared are we to handle this situation? I believe this event, one of the many we have planned, can help moving forward. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being with us today. I am looking forward to your support in making the world a better place. Together we can accomplish more. Thank you.
And thank you to Franz. Now let's turn our attention to this afternoon's business as promised. And technology allowing, we will have 3 panels today, starting with the demographic most involved in this climate change debate. The youth panel is up on the next generation. Your moderator for this afternoon's discussion then is brought to you by National Geographic Kids, and we saw it only fitting their managing director, Peter Johnson, lead it. Good afternoon, Peter.
Good afternoon, Georgie. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Very excited to host the first panel. Recent events have given a voice to a new generation of climate advocates from a younger demographic, Generation Z. But with older generations seemingly taking less notice of our climate emergency, are we seeing a generational divide, or will the climate crisis bring us together? As a starter, Aidan, how did you get it? How did you become a climate activist?
Well, I didn't start out as a climate activist specifically. I'm just a kid who grew up around the ocean, and so I grew up as a surfer, and it initially just started with caring about plastic pollution. And the main sort of eye-opening spark that got me thinking about our overall environmental state was the fact that you can't go surfing on a day that it rains, because all the pollution that washes from the land goes directly into the ocean. And as this 9-year-old kid, I had no idea that anything that I did miles away from the ocean could have any effect, especially so much so that you couldn't go surfing because you could get an ear infection. So I never really learned about anything environmental like that in school. We were just told to recycle, and that was it. And so I just started Googling. I got interested. And coinciding with that, I had this growing following on social media. So I developed this growing sort of sense of responsibility that I should be sharing the things that I'm learning with my generation, because it's not necessarily within the talking points of my social circles. You know, it's not something my generation generally thinks about. The people who care are a subsection. So the main idea that I have, and how it sort of spiraled into being a climate activist, is I'm someone who Googles. I look at what experts say, and I try and share those very smart and carefully worded messages to a larger audience through my voice.
That's really interesting. Thank you for that. And Raha and James, you guys have both traveled to places where climate change is much more extreme than, say, the UK. How has that affected your perspective on the crisis? Maybe starting with James.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think one of the problems for those of us that live in quite a stable, relatively temperate climate like the UK is that the climate crisis and extreme weather can seem very, very far away. But one remedy to that is going and chasing hurricanes for a BBC documentary series, which I did not so long ago. And when I found myself, unfortunately, trapped outside in a pickup truck in the 3rd most intense hurricane to ever strike the United States, and very, very nearly died, that gives you a pretty good perspective on how extreme climate chaos can be. And whilst you can't, it's difficult to specifically link hurricanes to climate change, climate scientists do warn that extreme weather is likely to intensify.
Cool.
And ultimately, but I think that's a fairly extreme example. What's actually, I think, really very relevant is that climate change is not as far away as you might think it is, in that before I went on my climate adventure last year, traveling fossil fuel free from the UK to Chile, I visited Fairbourne in Wales, which is a village that is currently being decommissioned by the council. And by that, I mean they are planning to dismantle the village because of rising sea levels. So before long, we'll have our first climate refugees in the UK. It's not such a far-flung problem.
No. And Raha?
Growing up in the Middle East as a child, I would notice that it became hotter and hotter, and I thought that was just a local occurrence. But when I went off and I started my 7 Summit quest and went to the 7 continents of the world, I realized that this is not something that's just in my backyard. One of the most stories that broke my heart, and it was repeated in every single continent I went to, is being sad about what was lost. All of these older climbers and older mountaineers telling me the story of this used to be an ice-capped mountain, or this used to be a river, or this used to be a more green part of the hike. So that made me realize and made me think that we are responsible because we inherit this earth. It's not ours. So if I'm not able to promise this to my future kids one day, then I have let them down. So everywhere I went, it was incredible. Every single continent, and I can say I'm very lucky to say that I've been to every single continent. This was the main topic that kept coming up. We're losing this. So whether it's the ice caps in Everest, or the greenery in Kilimanjaro, or the rivers in the Amazon, we are responsible. If we don't act now, then we have nothing to answer to the next generation, because we have let go of this amazing treasure that we have.
And I suppose seeing that firsthand probably adds to your levels of eco-anxiety, which I think is something that globally, is a big problem for mental health. And I know, Bella, you spoke about that in some of your talks. Could you give us a perspective on it, and also a suggestion about how people can help combat that?
Yeah, I think talking about eco-anxiety, it's a completely normal feeling. Of course, when we look at the challenges we have to face and the scale of what we have to do, we're going to be anxious. When we see the UN report saying we have 10 years to prevent catastrophic climate change, or 1 million species are at risk of extinction, then we're going to be anxious, especially when you're young and it seems to consume lots of your future. But, and I say this as not an optimist or a pessimist, but just a realist. I think that despair will do very little to help us. And in fact, it will probably even be detrimental. I think despair leads to apathy. And I read something by the Sunrise Movement, which said the thing about environmentalism is that you can be overwhelmed by the complexity of the problem, or you can fall in love with the creativity of the solutions. Yeah. And that's what I would suggest. We often fall into despair when we fail to imagine how positive and how great the future can be. And environmentalism isn't all about sacrifices. It's not all about railing against the system. We're also striving for a better future, and we're striving for a future with, cleaner cities where children can even play on some of the roads, where we have more biodiversity, where you can actually see the stars. And I think that's something hugely hopeful and hugely positive. So my one suggestion would be, read the terrifying statistics, inform yourself, but also keep in mind the future that we are striving for, and aim for that so you can remain hopeful.
That's really, really good point. And I think, COVID at the moment has brought out a lot of creativity. And I think a lot of people have got a lot of positivity from that. So it's a really, really interesting point. And Amy and Ella, is Jung activism rewarding for you guys? Is it a kind of similar thing to Bella? Getting involved, is that really helping?
Yeah, definitely. Being an activist is super rewarding for us, and especially getting to work with young people is definitely, I'd say, the most rewarding part of what we do, because we as young people are so often told to, sit down and be quiet, when actually we have the potential to have a really positive impact if we use our voices for good. And that's why we really try and focus on young people through Kids Against Plastic and through the youth empowerment scheme that we're launching, to try and help more young people realize that they do have this huge potential, and to help them get the skills and the confidences to make a difference. Because exactly as Bella said, so many of the large issues facing our planet are really scary, and it is so hard to know where to start. But we as young people, we are the future, and the changes that we make now especially will determine the rest of our lives.
And we were actually inspired by two girls who were our age when they started their campaign, when we were about to start Kids Against Plastic. So to be inspired by someone who had done something already at that age really made us feel like we could do something too. So being able to work with these young kids and hopefully encourage them to feel the same way we did is definitely really rewarding. And also being part of an activism community, which is positive and supportive and really enthusiastic, and getting to come to events like today and meet some incredible young people as well is also really rewarding.
Really, really well put. And Aidan, we know that in the UK, the majority of people, disregarding their demographic, believe that our climate is changing. However, we find that older generations are less willing to do anything about it. How do we inspire people on this topic in a way that makes them feel included and activated to make changes in their life?
Well, I think as Bella was saying, it's a very complex problem. And I would say that there's a large disconnect between the people who are motivated to take action and the people who are just unaware. And what I always strive for in any environmental messaging is simplicity. You need to make the information understandable to a 10-year-old, regardless of what age demographic you're speaking to. It needs to be simple, short. It needs to include what the problem is. You need to make sure they understand it, or else none of it relates. You need to establish how it connects to them. Why should they care? How does it affect them personally? How will it affect them personally? And then, while you have them hooked, you have their understanding and their interest, you need to tell them to take action. You need this to be quick, simple, and not some large thing like try and reduce your emissions. Like, give a specific example. If you don't make it personal for people, if you don't make it easy to apply and easy to cut down their carbon footprint, then you're just not going to get people. I think a lot of times the people who are driven to make great change within the environment, we sort of drown ourselves within the statistics and the just overcomplicating information. It doesn't need to be that complicated. If we want to reach people, make it simple, make it easy to get interested in. So that's
Absolutely
what I would
agree.
advise in fighting the disconnect.
Words that we live by at Nat Geo Kids, absolutely. Anyone else want to give a point to that? Very good. Cool.
I'm happy to chip in.
Yeah, go for it.
I think Aidan's spot on, basically, in terms of talking about the tendency to make life and everything overcomplicated, and the story of climate change can all too often feel massively overwhelming. You're inundated with facts and contradictory figures and opinions, and actually at the end of the day it is incredibly simple. And one of the things that was so inspiring for me traveling across the world last year on my climate adventure and meeting with young people was that the clarity of thought and razor sharp focus that so many young people have when they look at the climate crisis. At the end of the day, it's not a massively complicated issue. Sure, implementing solutions can be requires a lot of cooperation, but I think key to this is intergenerational cooperation that you mentioned at the very start of the talk. And ultimately, what we're talking about here is when we talk about story, the narrative, we need to change the story. What the guys have done so well in answering your question so far is talk about, we need to tell a positive story. That's how you get people involved. That's how you motivate them. You show the positive examples. You get out there. You tell the stories of those people that are making a difference, that are motivated and not giving up. And I think that's how you get people involved. And I read this wonderful book by this author called Richard Powers called Overstory, which I highly recommend. And one of the characters in the book at one point says, you cannot change someone's mind with just facts alone. The only way to truly change someone's mind is through the power of story. And so I think together we need to change that narrative to make it more positive and get people engaged and get them involved.
Yeah, completely agree. So in for the last question then, so are we seeing a generational divide, or will the climate crisis bring generations together? And Raha, do you want to go first?
Would love to. I think we will never be able to go past this massive hurdle if we stand divided. We have to unite, because it needs to come from the top up and from the bottom, up, down, and down, up. You cannot have a household, and I'm making it simple into a household. You cannot have a household that believes in a cause and then another individual in the same household that thinks this is ridiculous. Do you know what I mean? Like something as simple as not wanting a straw when you eat, and then you have someone else that just comes and says, this is ridiculous. Older than you, it will break that child's belief in that little tiny thing, which is not having a straw thrown into the garbage. So I truly, truly believe that it has to be a unity. We have to unite the generations. If there was anything that...
Yeah.
Sorry,
really,
I think I dropped off. But yes.
Really good points though. And I would actually argue that it's not will we, it's we will at some point, and it's how, and I don't know if Ella and Amy, you guys have got a view on that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think often this younger generation is viewed as the people who really want to make a change and are the activist generation almost. And I think the reason that is so is because we really see the urgency to bring about a change, because we're going to inherit this planet, and with that, we're going to inherit all of the problems with it. So we really want to see urgent change happening as soon as possible, because we can't wait any longer. So I think the way to make sure all of the generations are working together is for the older generations and the adults in power to show the same urgency as we want to see.
Exactly. And I think to sort of jump on what's already been said, I think that's why intergenerational collaboration on this is so important, because you need the young people to sort of drive that message home and spread the urgency of this. But then you also need the adults in power to think, right, enough is enough. We now need to actually take action, and you need both of them working together in order to actually make a change on this. And that's why I think it's really important that we don't divide the generations, because that is going to cause much more harm than it will good.
Absolutely. And Bella, do you have a perspective on it?
Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be a disparity between how different generations approach things, and it's clear that young people at the moment are incredibly concerned, but all of the activism that we're doing is building upon the science. It's building upon, decades of activism from other generations as well. And as James said, we're creating this narrative, and this isn't a narrative for young people. This is a narrative for humanity. And I think it's going to be one of the most unifying narratives which we're ever going to have to create. So I think, intergenerational collaboration is one of the most important aspects of it.
And I think we probably, we could get into a situation where we don't have a choice. If we are living through some sort of catastrophe, we are all going to have to come together, in the long run. So, yeah, I mean, James, do you have anything else to say, or Aidan?
I think, our lives in the future of human civilization depends on it. Yeah, I mean, if we can't get our act together and cooperate intergenerationally now, then it's game over. But I'm an optimist, and I believe in people, and I have faith in humanity, and I've put that to the ultimate test on my adventures around the world. People the vast majority of people are good, and we all want the best for our children and future generations. We need to tap into that. We need to work together. And when I've seen that happen, it's magic, because with the youth, the energy, the vibrancy, that clarity of thought that young people bring to the experience and the power and potential and ability to act in, with adult generations, combine those together, boom, you've got it. Yeah. Amazing things can happen. And I've seen that on countless examples, but we don't hear so much those stories, and we need to hear more of those stories. We need to buoy people up. We need to focus on the positives and just act, do one thing, start somewhere, get engaged, get enthused, and it snowballs.
Yeah, completely agree. Aidan, have you got anything you'd like to add to that?
Well, I mean, you've asked, is there a divide? I think for the most part, there are sort of three sections of people. There are people who are environmental activists and people who are interested and engaged. There are people who simply don't know. They're in ignorance, whether that's self-induced or the fact that they just haven't come across the knowledge. And then there are the people who are actually causing the problem, who for the most part are driven by greed. I'm speaking specifically about big businesses who are the main polluters for climate change. So in terms of unifying each other and changing, I think if we're going to reach people who simply don't know, then like I said, simplicity and environmental messaging and making it personal and easy, applicable ways of taking action. In terms of big business, if they're driven by greed, I don't know that if they're aware of the problem and actively continue to destroy the environment, I don't know that that's a personality that you can change. So in terms of the main polluters, I say the best bet is probably to look at driving consumers to more sustainable products. And so shift the business, make it profitable for those. Now, hopefully we can actually grab onto people's morale and actually get them to do the right thing. But that's unlikely if it hasn't happened yet. And there's been so much scientific evidence. So I think the most amount of change that's going to happen is as the problem gets closer and closer and people start to see even more destruction at their front door. Because right now, like Greta said, it's like a burning house and we're asleep right now and they just set fire to the front door and it's burning and people can still deny that it's in the other room. But pretty soon, as it gets closer, you're going to start seeing the burn marks on your skin. You're going to start caring. And that's when I think those three sections of people are going to have no choice but to have massive global action to hopefully reverse the damages before it's too late.
I think it's a really interesting point. And to your point about corporations and big business, they all have employees and those employees work for them. And ultimately, that they can start asking the questions of their companies that they work for and really trying to see how they can affect change within the businesses they work for. We all need employees. So really interesting. Well, thank you all for that. That's been amazing so far. And as a wrap, I think, we in answer to the question, it's not if, but when we will see climate change bringing us all together. And if we don't stop destroying the natural world and polluting it with fossil fuels, we'll be brought together to react to a global catastrophe. And that is a big, scary statement. And understandably, that will make a lot of people feel anxious, but we can combat that anxiety through positive action. We need to provide more people with the human environmental stories of climate change, but also the positive change that is happening to combat it. And positivity breeds hope and hope creates action. And there are no better examples of positive role models than our panelists today. So thank you all for the work that you guys are doing. And it's been really awesome chatting to you.
Thank you so much, and thank you to our first set of panellists today on the next generation. What a fantastic example they've set for us all. Great to have them on. So thank you to Aidan Gallagher, to Amy and Ella, Bella Lack, James LeVay and Raha Maharik as well. Really good to hear from them today. Shall we move on? Because we've got 2 more panels to get to this afternoon, but also one of them is a discussion on the electric car revolution and what now in terms of a greener world in a post-COVID economy as well. Bit of a treat for you first though, a high-profile climate advocate of climate change. Last week I spoke to the Arsenal and Spain right-back Hector Bellerin. He's a bit of an eco-warrior himself, and we asked him about his hookup with a charity quite close to our hearts.
We're One Tree Planted, and we do this. We plant trees on 4 continents for all of these reasons. You see, we believe that helping the environment should be simple. So for every dollar we raise, we plant 1 tree. If you want to make a difference, we're here to help. Simply visit our website, choose a location, tell us how many trees you want to plant, and we'll take care of the rest.
Hector, thank you so much for talking to us. Right, let's talk, shall we? First of all, most people know you as a defender for Arsenal, but you are also a defender of the planet, from what I understand. And actually, I first came to hear about this with your work of One Planted Tree, where you can tell us, where did this idea that you set up post-lockdown come from?
I don't know if you know this, but in football, for winning games, you kind of have like bonuses and stuff like this. So I've said, like, you know, it would be a nice way for every time that we win a game, use that money to actually help the planet. We chose to do it in the Amazon because we know that the deforestation in there has been like really, really bad. And we just thought that everything just aligned really well, and we're really happy with the results. We've won quite a few games since coming back from lockdown, and a lot of fans have gotten involved. Even like some teammates of mine have wanted to help.
Tell us about where your love for saving the planet's come from. Where's this social conscience come from with you?
You know, I've always lived very close to the sea. In the summer, I used to be in the beach every day. And, you know, it got to a point that there was days that we couldn't get in the water because of how dirty it was. And then, you know, I always thought that it would be so hard for me if I ever have kids or like new generations get to a point that they cannot enjoy the way I did when I was young because of all this stuff. So yeah, one day I feel like the switch just flipped, and I was like, I need to do as much as I can for all these causes. So you know, slowly I started living more conscious, you know, from reducing plastics to you know, driving an electric car to reducing waste. And you know, I try everything I can every day to make sure that you know, I live my best life for the planet. And you know, in the process, given the platform that I have, I try to make others conscious of this as well.
Well, you just mentioned that you're a driver of an electric vehicle, and
Yeah.
we're going to be coming on to the mass transition of electric vehicles in our discussion in a moment. So I guess the question is about how you made that decision.
Well, I have to say that since I switched into an electric car, like, I don't want to go back to driving a petrol car. That's honestly, and it's just not because of the effects of it, but also like how fun it is to drive. You know, I consider myself like a bit of like a technology nerd sometimes, and these all electric cars, they do things that petrol cars can do. So it's actually really, really fun to drive. And I think I bought my first electric car probably around 4 or 5 years ago. For me, it's important that when you have companies that you know that they're so open-minded and like looking at the future and like trying to challenge what is the normal, I think, you know, I always try my best to support them.
I mean, you're in an environment of very successful, quite wealthy people. Do they take on board your message? Do they join you with it?
I'm not gonna lie, it's difficult sometimes to find like a conscious athlete in our industry that really really cares about these things until something big really happens. People don't really take the consciousness, and that is not just in the industry but everywhere. So I think my message and what I try to say to people is like, yeah, there's all these issues going on, but you know, we have to protect the earth as well at the same time, because this is where we're living. And if it gets to the point that we cannot live in this place, then there's nothing we can get better, you know.
The quote that I've seen is that you are scared for the planet's future. So how big a threat do you feel climate change is? How big on the agenda should it be in the future?
I think people are talking about like, oh, in 2050 we're going to do this, in 2030 we're going to do this. I don't think that's how it works. I think like way before that we're going to have to make big changes if we don't want the world to like literally just die on us in a way, because our food supply depends on it, our biodiversity depends on it, so many things that we don't even understand, you know. And I think it has to be a full conscious choice, and it has to be really soon, because if we wait to this stage like 2040, 2050, I think you know, the irreversible damage can be bad.
We hope that you get the chance to plant many more trees.
Thank you.
Start up in the Premier League and also in the FA Cup final. Thanks so much for speaking to us.
You're welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to Hector for talking to us, and what a fantastic charity as well, planting many more trees because of Arsenal's results at the end of the football season, including an FA Cup win, of course, since we spoke to him. So, air pollution is one of the biggest environmental threats to world health. Every year in the UK alone, air pollution attributes the death of about 40,000 people. As more than 80 countries around the world, the UK plans to ban the sale of new petrol, diesel and hybrid vehicles by 2035. So, our next question is, how realistic is that goal? I'm joined by a panel of leading experts this afternoon for us to discuss whether it's full speed ahead or a car crash waiting to happen. Yes, it's a very esteemed panel this afternoon, headed by the world-renowned climate scientist Michael Mann. Professor Mann was one of the first people to produce a set of understandable data that showed the effects humans are having on this planet, and he joins us from Pennsylvania this afternoon. Christine Calderazzo is head of transport strategy for TfL, so she's responsible for how the nation's capital in the UK deals with the next 30 years. We've got Graham Cooper, project director for the National Grid. He will talk to us about electric vehicles and the decarbonisation of mass transport as well. He's a well-known industry expert. Steve Copley, editor-in-chief of Autocar, with more than 40 years in the industry. He's one of the leading voices. He's spent half his career there. And Britta Gross joins us from America as well, managing director for the Rocky Mountain Institute's mobility practice. So she'll be able to help us with market-driven strategies, technologies and policies that are going on in the USA as well, to give us a fuller picture. Now, also in your picture, bottom left, joining us just from qualifying, a very well-known face in the world of Formula E and electric racing, Sylvain Philippe, who's been there kind of from the start, actually, Sylvain. And I'll start with you, if you don't mind, because we might as well very quickly just reflect on what's happening in Berlin today, with Formula E being back. Not quite the qualifying results that you wanted today, but so much to play for over the next 6 races.
Welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are. Great to have such an incredible panel here online. Next time we'll try to do it in person, but this will do for now. So yeah, great. It's a super exciting time for us here. After 4 or 5 months hiatus, we've managed to go back racing with extremely strict measures to keep everyone very safe. But as you know, Formula E, it's a sport, we're a sport with a mission. And it's really important that we keep racing, keep showcasing these amazing electric cars and what they can do, because people are really hungry for it. And we can see even from today, we've just finished qualifying, and the feedback on social media is huge. People have been so hungry and missing sport so much. So yes, the next 9 days, 6 races are going to decide who's going to win the championship. So I'm going to be busy, but it's a pleasure to be here with you guys today.
Well, I'm afraid I'm going to hold you here for about the next 25 minutes, Sylvain. So if you don't mind, we'd love a little bit of your expertise. Professor Mann, let's start with a question on today's electric vehicles, shall we? If you could give us some scale, I guess, of the climate change problem generated by the transport sector as you understand it.
Yeah, well, transportation, the transport sector is responsible for about 25% or so of our global carbon emissions. So it's not the majority of our emissions, but it's a pretty big chunk. And ultimately, if we're going to tackle this problem, if we're going to tackle this crisis, then we need to decarbonize human civilization. And a big part of that is decarbonizing transportation. Now, for some perspective, the lockdown associated with the response to the COVID-19 pandemic has led to a decrease in global carbon emissions, in particular from transportation. But that decrease by the end of the year will only have amounted to about 5%. And so what that tells us is that we have to do more than this. We need to reduce our carbon emissions by more than 5% every year for the next 10 years if we're going to avert a catastrophic warming of more than 1.5 degrees Celsius. And so I think what the pandemic teaches us is that changes in personal behavior alone aren't going to give us the reductions we need. We need to decarbonize our society, and a big part of that is decarbonizing transportation. And that's what's so exciting about being part of the race against climate change, with Virgin and Envision really paving the way and demonstrating that we can do that. We've got the technology, and we can create a better world with more exciting racing, in fact.
And of course, you mentioned something that's so important and central to this debate, Professor Mann, and I'll throw this question to Christina Calderato, if that's all right, from Transport for London. Christina, your job is about how to make people leave their cars at home. It's never easy telling people that just one person can make a difference. How are you going to manage that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that, as you say, transport is a significant contributor, and in that sort of transport sector of the pie chart, if you like, cars and vehicular traffic are a particularly large contributor. So the absolute best thing we can do to reduce emissions and tackle climate change is to switch as many journeys as possible to truly zero carbon modes. And that means getting as many people walking and cycling, particularly those short trips, wherever you can. So at the heart of our Mayor's transport strategy, which stretches to 2041, is a really stretching, sustainable mode share target. So by 2041, we want 80% of journeys made in London to be on foot or cycle or on public transport. That's very challenging. We're about kind of 63% now, but just for reference, that's up from 50% in 2000 when Transport for London was founded. And in the context of population growth, that's really been moving the other direction. So that's all about investing in active travel. So in this mayoral term, we've tripled protected cycle and structure. It's making sure that people feel like they have safe and attractive alternatives that mean that it's actually a better choice for them not to get out of their cars. So I think for us, it's very much not about having kind of anti-car messages. It's about having positive alternatives that people want to choose that offer them better journey times, comfortable trips, and actually the best type of mode of transport for your journey. When people are making those choices, we want them to choose, particularly for short journeys, walking and cycling. Beyond that, on public transport, which we can then also try and green and reduce the emissions from that as far as possible.
And of course, TfL are not only involved in an electric car revolution, but of course it's the question of what you get people to use instead. Let's go to Graham Cooper, shall we? Graham is from the National Grid, and I guess the question when it comes to electric cars, Graham, is the UK ready for this, bearing in mind that electric cars need charging?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. It's that perennial pub argument: can the National Grid cope? And the answer simply is yes. So we see a growth over the next 20 or 30 years of electric car use. But what you maybe don't see is that we're going to add 3 or 4 times more offshore wind generating power in just the next 10 years. So what that really, really leads us to is cleaner power in the energy market, that cleaner power being put into electric cars. So the cars will be being powered by clean electricity, and that grid is getting cleaner all the time. So from an energy perspective, absolutely no problem at all. From a wires perspective, the wires that we need to run the country are forever changing anyway. So we've been building wires out to wind farms in Scotland, to solar plants in the south of England. So there will be some modest modifications to some of the wires to accommodate, but this is part of our day-to-day business. Fine. So I come back to that argument that the grid can cope.
And if you don't mind, we'll also come back to the argument people say about using electricity to charge a vehicle. But I would like just quickly to get our other two panellists in, because it's very difficult to make sure that I get you the chance to talk this afternoon. Steve Cropley from Autocar Magazine, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Steve, for me as a motorist, the biggest issue maybe I perceive is getting people to give up their much beloved petrol and diesel cars. Would you agree?
I think so, although good afternoon, everybody, for a start. Well, to some extent, I guess, but I'm a confirmed petrolhead, and I've managed to ride a bicycle, and I am persuaded by electric cars just by having driven enough of them to know that they're really good things. And I see the congestion that they cause, and I think we can hope for some logic in the future.
Let's talk to Britta Gross as well. Good afternoon, Britta. Thank you so much for waiting for your turn to speak. And I will encourage you all to come back and on any points made this afternoon as well. Britta, if you could just fill us in really in terms of your work in the mobility practice, and the possibility of limiting a global temperature rise. How much do you think, I've seen a quote from you talking about light duty vehicles that need to be electrified by say 2030 just to prevent tiny changes.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Our work shows that at least 1 in 5 of all of us need to be driving an electric car just as quickly as we can, and certainly before 2030, in order to keep the temperature rise well below 2 degrees. It means we also have to do the things like getting out of the cars and walking and biking and reducing the vehicle miles we travel. Can it be done? Yes, if we start now. Each year we delay and don't get into electric vehicles, for example, we just increase the targets for the next year, and it gets increasingly more difficult. One thing to think about is every mile that we drive in an average gasoline vehicle today emits about a pound of carbon. Think about that. Every mile is a pound of carbon. So it's our responsibility to get out of these cars, minimize the kind of miles that we're driving, and then convince 1 in 5 of your friends to get in one too.
My God, that's a terrifying statistic. And also, we're talking about carbon neutral with the Carbon Trust in our third panel this afternoon, so I'll be sure to remember that. Sylvain, if I can ask you, you've been involved in electric racing. I mean, you were involved in the first EV Cup, so you've been around for a long time. Just about the attitudes, how you see as somebody who is very heavily involved in electric racing, and how that is changing perspectives in terms of passenger cars and what people will buy in the future.
Well, the last 10 years have made me an optimistic. Basically, I think 10 years ago when I started playing with the concept of racing and electric cars, people thought we were completely crazy. And when formally started, very few people thought it would work. And now we are one of the biggest motorsports in the world. More than 400 million people watched the series last year, and it's the fastest growing sport pretty much in the world. So the potential is there, and people get it. So I've seen a huge change in perception from 10 years ago, where people were dismissing electric cars for whatever reason you can think of. And now most people I meet or hear tell me that they're pretty much all considering an electric car now. And actually a lot of them would like an electric car. And now we're going to a much more ground level work where people are wondering about cost and range and pragmatic things because they're generally considering these cars. So a huge change in 10 years. But now it's our job, all being convinced that going electric is the way to go. Now we have to do the work on the ground to convince people that these cars are good. And then ultimately I'll get back to that. I want people to want to drive an electric car. I don't want people to feel like they are forced to. And that's our job here at Formula E, to make these cars and this technology exciting.
We've got a few gremlins in Sylvan's microphone, but we'll work on that before we come back to him. Professor Mann, can I come back to you, please? Because it was mentioned a little bit by Britta. She talked about Americans and electric, the possibility of electric vehicles. But having lived in America, I know that walking, for example, which is something that Transport for London and the capital in London have benefited so much for, as well as people getting onto bikes. I know that getting Americans and American industry to give up the kind of gas guzzlers, the fossil fuels, is incredibly difficult. You're up against a lot in the States, maybe more than we are in Europe.
Well, that's right. And there's been a campaign by fossil fuel interests to, literally deny the scientific evidence that human-caused climate change is upon us. And there's been an effort to block progress when it comes to switching away from fossil fuels, moving towards renewable energy. Some conservatives have even tried to outlaw the sale of electric vehicles in certain states. So there has been this concerted effort by fossil fuel interests and those promoting their agenda to block and slow down this transition. That having been said, what we're seeing now is Americans really embracing clean energy and recognizing the devastating impacts of climate change, recognizing that we need to do something about it, and looking at solutions and understanding that we can create a cleaner environment and a prosperous economy at the same time. That's, again, why I think it's so important, efforts like Virgin Envision Racing, to demonstrate that electric vehicles can be cool. Electric vehicles can be exciting. We can create a better future, a more exciting future, and solve this problem at the same time. So I think Americans are coming along. That having been said, we can only do so much without policymakers, politicians who are willing to do what's right for us rather than the bidding of fossil fuel interests who too often fund their campaigns. And here in the States, in a matter of months, we have a major election, a presidential election, where we'll have an opportunity to go to the voting booth and vote on climate and make sure that we get policymakers who will help us move forward.
And I guess I might throw this question over to Graham Cooper then, as head of as your role in the national grid. Is the UK dealing with this in terms of policy and government responsible action?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, we've had for a little while now the ban on the sale of new internal combustion engine vehicles from 2040 onwards. Government are currently consulting on bringing that forward to 2035, and the consultation's just closed. That will include plug-in hybrid vehicles. But of course, what it does do is stimulate the debate that this is not just about transport. What's really good and encouraging from me is there's been a level of joined-up government discussion here, in that you can't just outlaw the sale of new combustion vehicles. You need to actually think about where the power comes from. So what I've been really encouraged by is OLEV, the Office of Low Emission Vehicles, is a sort of joint government department between energy and transport, actually to join the dots on this. And what we're also seeing is that Treasury, who hold all the purse strings, they've even allocated in the budget in February for £500 million to put down enough grid infrastructure on motorway service areas to be able to have high power en route charging. So, government is moving in this space. I suspect we'll see very quickly in September, probably, the output of the government's consultation on the sale of internal combustion engine cars. Yeah. And I think that really sets the scene ready for COP26, which is the climate change summit in November next year.
And funnily enough, we'll be talking to our UK representative for COP26 a little bit later this afternoon in our third panel. Steve Cropley, if I can ask you kind of the same question really about the resistance to give up fossil fuel and to embrace new technology. How do you see it in your industry when it comes to the fragility of the market for car manufacturers at the moment, COVID-19 and of course the fossil fuel giants that will kick and fight against it?
There is certainly some resistance, but I think as I said before, I think the application of logic is rapidly starting to overtake this. The big problem is going to be to keep the car companies profitable, because they can't possibly afford to build the cars we need unless they continue to make a profit. And in the meantime, it takes 6 years, 12 years, 18 years even to develop a range of the kinds of cars that everybody wants to reduce or completely cut carbon. But unfortunately, in order to do it, the companies have to be able to produce a range of cars that continue to be attractive to the buyer. If they're not attractive, they won't be bought. And if they're not bought, they won't be profitable. And therefore, the investing that's going to be required and the R&D that's going to be required will not be possible. And that seems to me to be the big problem, to get us through this next 12 to 15 years with the companies that make the hardware still intact, profitable.
Okay, and Sylvain, if you don't mind me asking, how far apart is what you do in Formula E and what we are getting as consumers in terms of electric vehicles?
Well, it's quite far apart at the moment simply because of the nature of motorsport. We are, of course, using cutting-edge prototypes and the latest technology. However, there is a really good news here, is that the time scale between innovation in Formula E to seeing these technologies being transitioned to road cars will be much, much, much quicker than what you've seen in Formula One. You know, in Formula One, on average, people talk about 10 years roughly, give or take, depending. Here, there's absolutely no reason why in a space of 2 or 3 years, you could have clear advancements we make mostly on efficiency of motors, inverters, and software. You can see these advancements happening in the real world. I'll give you an example. When we started racing 3-4 years ago, our race cars were operating at 700 or 800 volts, which was twice what you would see on road cars. 3 years later, cars from Porsche, Audi, and all the new ones coming are adopting that technology. And that's been possible because the supply chain has been created for Formula E to deliver these very high voltage cars that basically improve the efficiency. And that's just one example. There'll be many more to come. So you will see, I'm very confident electric cars within the next 3 to 5 years that you'll be able to buy will be very exciting. I have no doubt at all about it. There'll be great cars to drive. What we'll have to work on, of course, is the cost, the charging infrastructure, and all the things that we know about. But it's in progress. It's happening.
Sure. Britta, if you don't mind me asking you, how bad do you think the damage is if in terms of how much can we reverse with electric vehicle use, and how long do you think it will take?
Well, I think we just have to act now, and we have to take action today. We have to get past the cost issues. That's the number one urgency at battery makers and automakers too, is to get cost out of these products. As soon as they're profitable, you can see scale happening instantly in the marketplace. We have a little bit of a gap right now, but every resource at these makers, at the product makers, is being put towards pulling out the cost of this thing. I would just describe we're at a really exciting point here in the U.S. I would just describe it as we're sort of get on your marks phase. We're not at get set and go, but we're at the get on your marks. Everyone's talking about it. We don't have a national strategy. But we are seeing the leadership, a couple, some of the automakers, some of the utilities, some of the states. These guys, there's a lot of conversation, a lot of discussion. Everyone knows that business as usual is not going to get us to where we have to get by 2030, the 1 in 5 at a minimum. And so the race is on. All we need is a clear signal, a national policy. Michael mentioned it, is really, really critical right now, but it's going to happen. It's just a matter of driving this information. I love RAC. I love the race. I think getting that awareness out, 400 million viewers, is terrific education and awareness. It's exactly what we need to be doing.
Well, it'll be fascinating to see what the outcome of the American presidential election is, because only one outcome is certainly going to help the transition to electric vehicles, that's for sure. Michael, would you mind me asking you about the wider picture of the EV supply chain? There are people who argue, and I will definitely also come to you, Graham Cooper, on this, that you're taking with one hand and giving with the other. For example, lithium mining for batteries for electric cars, Michael. Does it balance itself out?
Yeah, well, there's no question. And ultimately, everything that we manufacture, there is an environmental footprint, and we need to minimize that environmental footprint. But when you look at, whether it's wind or solar or electrification, battery technology, all of these technologies are vastly superior to burning fossil fuels when it comes to the health of our environment in general, and obviously when it comes to combating climate change. And sort of building on the previous discussion, what we need to do simply is level the playing field. Right now, fossil fuels have an unfair advantage. They're doing this damage to the planet and they're not paying for it. So we need incentives for renewable energy, a price on carbon, other policies that will simply level the playing field, because on a level playing field, renewable energy will win, electrification will win, electric vehicles will win, and we will all win.
Graham, would you like to pick up on that?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, you're absolutely right. The moment in the UK, the cheapest form of making electricity is offshore wind power, or wind power in general. The way we can be very clever with it, though, is actually by legislating smart charging. So when the wind is blowing, you can dump that power into cars. It means the power in the cars is the cleanest power that there will be. What it also is, by seeing the power going into cars, that actually stimulates the growth in more renewables. So you match the upstream growth in renewables to the downstream growth in clean technology, so both transport and heating. And that really has that great symbiotic relationship. I mean, up until about 2017, the dirtiest thing we did as a country in the UK was make power since the start of the Industrial Revolution. Now the grid is really, really clean and getting cleaner on a daily basis. So again, that perennial pub argument that you're just moving the emissions from a tailpipe to a power station no longer holds.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I recently found out as well that if you generate your own power, for example, you have your own wind turbine or something, you can also give into the national grid as well, and that will help your costs. Christina, if I could come back to you, when it comes to Transport for London's strategy, how much is electric? How much because obviously walking and cycling are the two things that London has a huge benefit from. But for example, if we encourage people in a post-COVID environment to stay within their cars and come back to the capital for work, for example, that's not going to be very good for our environment. How much is your strategy towards complete electric vehicles across the board with your buses, your tubes, everything like that?
So first of all, I think we definitely won't be telling people to come back in their cars, because with a city of 9 million people, there just literally isn't space on the roads for them all to come back in their cars. So, but we also recognise that it's not possible for everybody to walk or cycle. You don't want people to feel like you're too ideological about that. So absolutely, where people can be walking, cycling, using public transport, that's what we want them to do. And for all the other people for whom driving is still necessary, we want them to be in the cleanest possible vehicle. So we've introduced the ultra low emission zone now in central London, which means that you have to pay £12.50 if you're in a car that doesn't meet those emission standards, or much more like £100 for heavier vehicles if you don't meet those emission standards. Next year, we're rolling that zone out, so it will cover 22% of London. It'll be the whole of inner London. So we're setting those vehicle standards for, it's primarily for air quality emissions, but within that, we're able to try and start influencing the way the fleet is going. We're also offering our own, we've got a van scrappage scheme, and we have a car and motorcycle scrappage scheme. And that incentivises people to scrap their older dirty vehicles in return for payment. And then we hope that they can either shift to another kind of mode, or we offer an enhanced payment, for example, for vans for small businesses. We'll give them more money if they're planning to invest in an electric vehicle. So we are trying to support people to do that. With more government funding, we could do more. But we're trying to enable people to make those individual choices. And then with our own fleets, since 2018, all newly licensed taxis, so black cabs, have had to be zero emission capable. And we now have hundreds of green zero emission capable black cabs. We've got a fully electric one now as well. The fleet of 9,000 buses presents a massive opportunity to lead the way in decarbonisation. And we've got a plan to have a fully electric bus fleet by 2037. And then we're also looking at the way we can try and get our TfL-controlled rail services to be zero carbon by 2030. And that goes back to purchasing renewable power, and we're trying to look at how we can do that now through some power purchase agreements. So it's very much about us making sure that the services we run are as low impact as they can possibly be, making sure that as many people as possible are using them, and for those that aren't, we're giving them the choices and the options to switch their vehicles to the cleanest possible ones as well.
We are not blessed with a huge amount of time this afternoon, so I guess what I'd really like to do for all of you, if you don't mind, is our youth panel earlier today, they discussed the importance of giving the solution with the problem to people who don't really want to hear about it, but also about keeping it simple. So how would you persuade a petrol head or someone to get into or purchase an electric vehicle, what do you think is the most important piece of information? Steve, if it's all right, I'll start with you.
I think the most persuasive thing is to get these people to drive them. I never forget letting my son drive a current electric car, and he said, "Good God, it's just like a car." And what he couldn't believe was how easy it was to drive, how quiet, how smooth, and all the rest of it. We need to make progress, but I think the most persuasive thing is to get people to try them.
Michael, would you scare someone with environmental figures and knowledge, or how would you get people into an electric vehicle?
Yeah, no, I think scaring people isn't the right approach. We don't want to lead people down a path of despair and doomism. We need to convey the urgency, but also the agency, the fact that there are solutions, that we can solve this problem. I was inspired by the youth panel earlier, and indeed, if you are a fossil fuel executive, I don't care who you are, we all care about our children and our grandchildren. We all want to leave behind a better world for future generations. So be part of the solution. Be proud that you're actually helping create a better world for future generations.
Britta, I'll ask you the same question, if that's all right, as well, about how to persuade people to change their ways.
Absolutely. So beyond what Steve mentioned about getting in the car and just drive it for 5 minutes, it's an amazing experience. They are inherently better vehicles to drive. I would talk about the economics. I can't imagine considering buying a gasoline vehicle after 2025 or 2030. Look at where the money's flowing around the world. Investors are pulling out of fossil and carbon fuel investments. They're divesting from those investments. These vehicles, the gasoline diesel vehicles on the roads, when you purchase them in 2025 and they have a 12-year car life, or a truck might have a 20-year life, these are going to be dwindling value assets. And I wouldn't want to be sitting on large fleets of vehicles in the time frame after 2030, certainly, and not know who I could sell this vehicle to afterwards. I think the economics of this are really important to watch.
Yeah, I really hope that we as a generation can do something for future generations that we don't regret. I'm going to leave the last word to you, Sylvain, if that's all right, as somebody who's such a high-profile advocate for electric vehicles, of course, because that's the industry in which you work. Would you use Formula E as an example?
Yes, to some extent, but it's getting easier by the day. I'm the definition of a car enthusiast. I've always been since I was 5 years old, and I'll now drive a high-performance electric car, and there is no chance I would ever go back to a petrol car. So I'm trying to let anyone around me as much as possible to try my car. They all love it, and then they want to get one. If we all do that on our own level, then we convince a lot of people. But of course, the real main lever, the main platform is Formula E, where we basically every day of the week try to convey these messages, and you are all absolutely correct. Shaming and guilting people into getting electric cars is not the way. At the end of the day, from a fundamental engineering point of view, electric motors are just better. There's no question. It's just the reality. The question is to slowly get that message across. But it's definitely happening. Our job is just to accelerate it. But I'm confident. Let's keep doing this every year, and then we'll get there.
Really excited to be part of it. Sylvain Filippi, Britta Gross, Steve Cropley, Graham Cooper, Christine Calderazzo, and Professor Michael Mann. Thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Really great to talk to you. That's panel 2 over. It's gone far too fast this afternoon. Before our third and final panel this afternoon, we can bring you a special announcement from the team itself. Climate change is, of course, a passion shared by everyone at Envision Virgin Racing, but also by its partners. A little bit earlier, we caught up with the team's Operation Director, Jennifer Babington, and Genpac's Chief Digital Officer, Sanjay Shrivastava, to tell us more.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. My name is Jennifer Babington. I'm Operations Director at Envision Virgin Racing. The reason that we're here today is because we are a race team with a purpose. Our mission is to energise the race against climate change, to excite a generation into the mass adoption of e-mobility powered by renewable energy. About 18 months ago, around the time I joined the team, we set about the mission of understanding our carbon impact on the planet and becoming carbon neutral. And you might think, why would you go about doing that? You're a race team. Your job is to win races. Well, it's really hard. How can we talk to other people about sustainability and about the carbon impact if we ourselves haven't been able to understand what our impact on the planet is? And so I'm delighted today to announce on behalf of the team, and this was a true team effort, that we are fully certified as carbon neutral by the Carbon Trust. We're the only team on the FE grid to have achieved this accolade, and it's something we're incredibly proud of. And I think if you step back and look at the big picture, the Formula E motorsports team is the greenest grid in motorsports, and we're one of the greenest teams on that greenest grid, which I think is quite an exciting announcement for us, and quite an important achievement. But it's not a competition that we want to win. This is something that we should all be working for together. Everyone should take the time to understand and quantify what their carbon impact on the planet will be. And so we want everyone to join us in this purpose. We'd really like to thank the Carbon Trust for all of their work with us in helping us achieve this carbon status, and also the Genpact team, who have been instrumental in helping us understand and help us to quantify the data that we've been working with. And I'm delighted to introduce Sanjay, who is the Chief Digital Officer of Genpact, who is joining us today to talk more about it. I'll hand over to Sanjay.
Jennifer, thank you. And the greenest team on the greenest grid. What a fantastic tagline. I hadn't thought about that earlier, and thank you for mentioning that. Congratulations. I'm so proud. I'm so excited for the team. It's fantastic. Great work there. I watched you go through this thinking, and I heard you just answer my question. I think the three things I took away that are really critical, and I think it translates for all of us. Number one is get the data foundation right and measure it, because if you can't measure it, if you don't know what it is today, it's very difficult to get control over it. And that comes down to building a strong base of data and an architecture that allows you to measure, report, visualize, and see it. I think that's number one. I think the second thing I got from you was make it inclusive. So this isn't something that is done by the corporate department or the sales department or the marketing department or the data analytics department. This is a corporate, this is an enterprise, this is a team initiative. Everyone needs to be on it. And you talked about the board. I'd say from the board right down to every single employee of the company, give them a voice, get them engaged, get them involved, and make this a collective enterprise for the company. I think it's a second key learning I heard you sort of talk about. And I think the third one, and this is so critical, and you said it so beautifully, Jennifer, is don't approach it as a big ocean, break it down into small bites and solve for it. So it isn't about, we're gonna solve for the whole thing tomorrow morning. It's about how do we do one small thing today? And if we can translate that into actionable small steps, and that happens in the back of insights, which happens in the back of data, which happens in the back of the visualization that we can bring in, then actually you take one small step forward in the collective whole. And in the end, this is all about how do you balance and how do you get to that collective betterment of all of us, of planet Earth. And so it's fantastic to hear you speak about that. I know that in working with you and the team there, we've had some learnings. I know some of that are so common and consistent across the rest of the industry. I so value our time together, and thank you for sharing that with us.
Thanks, Sanjay, for joining us. Some really insightful comments, and we're looking forward to hearing more about what you've been up to at Genpact in panel 3. And thanks again to all the team. This is an amazing achievement. You've all worked really hard. We're incredibly proud of you. Well done.
Well, what fantastic news that is, to be the greenest team on the greenest grid. So let's move on, shall we, to our third and final panel debate. The coronavirus has had a devastating consequence for businesses and livelihoods around the world, but has also seen a dramatic cut in CO2 emissions. And in many countries, governments are now looking towards a recovery as the pandemic first wave slowly recedes, but plans for economic stimulus go into trillions of dollars. And as economies pick up pace, emissions will rebound inevitably. Huge stimulus plans will have consequences on CO2 emissions. So should businesses be forced to go green or go home? looking forward to this panel. And here are our guests then. Laura Timlin is Director of Business Services at the Carbon Trust, aiming at sustainable low-carbon economies by helping businesses, governments and organisations to deliver them by reducing carbon emissions. Let's also hear from Lindita Jafiri-Salifo, who is the Sector's Engagement Lead for the UN this afternoon, an advocate of reducing carbon footprint. She's made her mark very heavily in the fashion and sports industry. Nigel Topping joins us this afternoon, recently appointed UN government representative at high-level climate action champion for the climate talks, the UN climate talks COP26, which you may remember came up earlier. And with he's got more than 18 years experience in the field. Sanjay Shrivastava, we've already heard from this afternoon, Chief Digital Officer at Genpact, who have more than 90,000 employees worldwide. He is one of 10 digital transformation influencers that you should be following today. That is according to the International Data Group. And last but not least, Sylvie Huisel is the International President of Envision Digital, a world-leading green technology company specializing in AIoT. And of course, owner of Formula E outfit Envision Virgin Racing. So Sylvie, it seems only sensible really that I start with you, if you don't mind, if you would give us your reaction to the fact that the carbon neutral status has been delivered to Envision Virgin Racing, and what an achievement that is.
Yeah, indeed. But I think we need to lead by example. And our deep belief at Envision is technology will allow us to reconcile performance and sustainability, green and growth.
Well, it's a fantastic achievement. And Laura, from the Carbon Trust, could you just explain to us how hard or how easy it is to become carbon neutral, how feasible an achievement it is for companies to do it?
Yeah, so it's a relatively straightforward process for organisations to achieve carbon neutral status, but it does require a commitment from the organisation to go through a number of steps. So those steps in brief are to understand the impact of the organisation, so understand the carbon impact that they have, to think about how they can then reduce that impact through a really robust carbon management plan, and then to commit to offsetting any emissions that can't be reduced, and completing that process over a number of years to continue that reduction. And it should very much be seen as part of a long-term strategy for organisations who want to commit and achieve a net zero economy by 2050.
And Laura, are you seeing companies wanting to commit to this?
Yes, there's increasingly more interest in organisations wanting to commit to becoming carbon neutral. And I think that's because there's a building momentum from a number of different areas where customers, suppliers, sponsors are asking for organisations to make those types of commitments, because it's becoming increasingly important to them as their business grows.
Lindita, if you don't mind me asking you, you've obviously got huge experience in the world of fashion brands and sport and things like that. What have you learned that you think can be passed on to people in other sectors about becoming more environmentally friendly or carbon neutral as a company?
Thank you. Well, I think that in order to achieve the kind of systemic progress that we want to see, that's the transformation of industries to sustainable future, we're going to need everyone to change business as usual and not just look at own operations, but really look at the full supply chain, because doing it alone won't get us where we need to be. And under the umbrella of UNFCCC's Global Climate Action, we have initiated a stream of work that engages consumer-facing sectors and actors along the supply chain in conversations around that particular transformation. Fashion industry was one of them. The discussions there were around, how can we translate Paris Agreement into concrete actions? What will the direction of travel look like? Where is our biggest impact? What are some of the tools and programs already available? Can we scale them? How do we engage with policy and finance? Who else do we need to bring into the conversation? So really these types of granular conversations generated what we call Fashion Industry Charter for Climate Action, which brings together brands and suppliers and retailers, industry associations and NGOs to align around a set of commitments and work together to identify roadmaps, how to get there, how to get to net zero, and what does the best of action look like? So it's really a multi-dimensional challenge that we're trying to address here, and focusing on a multiplicity of issues, looking at measurement and reporting approaches and decarbonization pathway, but then energy efficiency, renewable energy, policy engagement, financial tools, so all the different aspects, and then moving on to logistics and consumers, and having this really holistic focus on the supply chain where the majority of impact come from. And of course, the aim is to create really an enabling framework, an ecosystem, if you will, of best practice recommendations and solutions, and build on what's already there by working closely with agencies and initiatives that are established in the space.
Nigel, I'm quite interested in what you'll be discussing at COP26 next year, because I think the conversation may be very different to how it would have been pre-COVID. That's a worldwide issue. In the UK, we've also obviously got a post-Brexit issue. Is expecting companies to go green or go home too much in this economic environment?
I don't think so. I mean, it's fundamentally a competitiveness issue. I mean, investors with over $5 trillion of assets are saying they're going to fully decarbonize their portfolios. Amazon's committed to net zero 2040, Apple net zero 2030, Mercedes net zero 2039. It's not a trade-off. It's like, if you want to win commercially, you've got to commit to the future, and the future is going to be zero carbon. So it's a race that the bold will win, because we know that the industrial transformation happens exponentially, something that Sanjay and Sylvie as technologists know all about, right? And if you get behind the curve, it's very hard to catch up.
Yeah, it's something that came up in our youth panel a lot earlier this afternoon, about the fact that we should, as consumers, support the companies that are aiming to do things that are good for climate change, and to support climate change as well. Sanjay, good afternoon, welcome as well. Thank you very much for talking to us this afternoon. Look, there's been a lot of changes to how companies work. There's been a kind of a new normal post-pandemic. How does the sustainability agenda become a new normal in terms of the clients you work with?
I think this is a super important topic for corporations across the globe. We have a chance to work with some of the largest global businesses. And when you speak with the boards, you find for these companies that there are three things in their mind. There's resilience, and particularly relevant with the post-pandemic situation. There is growth, and then there is perseverance. And resilience is coming on the back of digital transformation. Growth comes on understanding the experience economy and being able to deliver an experience composite of purpose in a way that it makes sense for consumers and customers. But really, persistence comes from purpose, and a purpose-driven enterprise is becoming increasingly clear as the way to actually persevere in the long run and to build sustainable businesses. And boards understand that, and large corporations understand that. And for the most part, if I look across the companies that we serve, the key things that people focus on in terms of purpose are a combination of inclusion, racial injustice now, and then also the idea of sustainability and a sustainable planet. And so this idea of go green, go home is central. It's really large. It's on the minds of most boards that I interact with. And I think it isn't because it's something on the side. It's because it's part of the main purpose of the corporation. And as you focus on resilience, growth, and perseverance, sustainability just is intrinsically and automatically a large part of that consideration.
Sylvie, we saw, for example, CO2 emissions go down during the pandemic, but also energy usage from companies that were producing so much less or working so much less during the pandemic. How do we maintain that environmentally friendly approach when demand will creep back up and things will start to go back to normal? How do, for example, Envision Digital go green or go home, I would say?
Yeah, I think the good news was we only saw a decrease of carbon emissions by 20% when the whole global economy was at stall, which means stopping the economy is not a solution. Good news is COVID did not do so well for the environment, which means everybody understood you need to really change the underlying system. You need to leverage technology to reconcile economic performance and sustainability, because stopping the economy, shutting down the world is not going to suffice. So now everybody is actually, be it companies or consumers, looking for a greener and healthier future. And all lies in execution, I think, because when it comes to energy, like other complex topics, everything is systemic. We got rid of printing and we went for zero paper. And now we are challenged with data centers accumulating storage of emails. So you try to fix something, you break something else. So here, what's important, and we work with the World Economic Forum on that, is to, we are one of the numerous companies actually thinking of that and trying to assemble the right set of approaches. It has to be extremely systemic. So we commented on companies and consumers going green, meaning going for energy efficiency and massive electrification. But also we need to be sure the electricity we consume is actually green, coming from renewable energies like wind and solar. And this is not going to be big utilities just pushing down the grid the classic type of supply they used to push. It's about much more distributed generations with corporations which were not in that ecosystem initially starting to become producers for their own needs or to actually supply other companies. And it's about consumers becoming producers with rooftop solar and micro generation, and also about electric vehicles, which are going to, in the future, charge in a way that they are actually having a positive impact on the grid and helping to shave the peak load. So when you look at all that, it's a totally different system, which will require far more smartness and a set of incentives and coordinated actions and infrastructure investment into the grid, which has to be articulated in a much more thought-through way, because just deciding everything is going to go electric is not going to fix the problem.
I'm very mindful of time. I quickly want to ask Nigel, first of all, is there a danger that climate change falls back down the agenda given what's happened in 2020?
I mean, I think you might think that's a risk, but we're seeing the opposite, actually. So I named a couple of the companies, and every week we're seeing more companies and more cities and more investors commit to net zero. We know we launched this Race to Zero campaign. More than 53% of the world's economy is now covered by organizations committed to net zero, and that's growing all the time. So I think that we're seeing, actually, if anything, an acceleration as some of the things, people have realized that actually having clean air in our cities is a great thing. So let's accelerate investment in electric vehicles and in renewable energy.
Sure. And Laura, closing with you, if that's all right, Laura, just to ask how people will imagine being carbon neutral or going that way is an almost impossible thing for their companies to do. Where would you advise them to start?
So I think the starting point is always to really calculate your impact. So understand what your footprint is, and then work out some really simple steps that you can take to make those reductions. So switching to renewable power is a really quick and easy way to start that journey.
You've all been fantastic today, and I'm so sorry that we're out of time, and I could quite frankly have this conversation all day. That is our third and final panel. I hope we gave you all some food for thought this afternoon. If you want to join the debate, you can use the hashtag #RaceAgainstClimateChange. You can check out our website at envisionvirginracing.com, and of course look at all our social media channels as well. Thank you so much to all our participants and panelists this afternoon who've joined us in what surely is one of the most important conversations we can have. From all of us here at Envision Virgin Racing, now the greenest team on the greenest grid, enjoy the rest of Formula E. The first of 9 races over the next 6 days is on in just a few hours' time. From all of us here at Silverstone at Envision Virgin Racing HQ, it's bye for now.
The future of our planet is at risk. Our environment is facing an existential crisis, and transportation is at the heart of this problem. So in 2014, we created a special team to inspire generations to tackle climate change by harnessing the power of Formula E and our renewable technology to take our pledge around the globe. So join us on this incredible journey and help us win the race against climate change.